Welcome to the Formula Bone F1 Show's 2022 Japanese Grand Prix recap. I'm Jared Borislow, but you can call me J-Bone. Let's get into it, folks. J-Bone! First up, on my Japanese Grand Prix preview episode, I gave you 3 storylines to follow throughout the race weekend. Let's see how those shaped up. The first storyline was, will this be the race where Max Verstappen is finally crowned 2022's World Drivers' Champion? And indeed it was, as Max Verstappen is now officially your 2022 World Drivers' Champion. Though, I will say, when you compare last year's crowning of World Drivers' Champion to this year's, I am not sure if you'll ever see a bigger discrepancy in terms of drama. Whether you liked it or not, last year's champion being crowned at the end of an admittedly one-sided single-lap shootout was one of, if not the most dramatic championship endings in motorsport history. Not even just F1, all of motorsport. Then, you have the end to this year's World Drivers' Championship that saw Max Verstappen not even know for sure he won the title until he was in the cooldown room, and also saw him not even believe that news when it was told to him. This is because when the race ended, Max was under the impression that 2 things were true which would have prolonged his wait for the World Drivers' Championship. First, that the race would only be awarding partial points, as only 28 of the scheduled 53 laps had been completed, or just 53% of the race. And second, that Charles Leclerc had finished P2 without Max getting the fastest lap point and P1, which meant that even if the race had awarded full points, Max still would be 1 point shy of winning the title because he needed that fastest lap point. Well, in a matter of minutes, both of those championship inhibitors went flying out the cockpit like a helmet visor tear-off into a Charles Leclerc brake duct. Speaking of Charles Leclerc, he was handed a 5-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage right before he crossed the finish line while he was defending against Checo, dropping him down to P3. Max actually found this out from interviewer Johnny Herbert in Parc Ferme, though I must note, Herbert did a poor job of adequately explaining what all was going on to Max, so I'm not sure if Max even understood what Herbert was actually telling him. Herbert even told him he won the championship. Max reacted in a way where I'm not even totally sure he knew what Herbert was saying. My theory is that Max either thought Johnny was congratulating he and Checo on getting a 1-2, now that Leclerc was in P3, or that he thought Johnny Herbert had just been given bad information because somebody else had already told him, hey, you can't win it here, partial points, yada yada, and thus Max was just kind of going along with Johnny and then didn't believe him, and then went into the cooldown room where he was eventually told, hey, you are the champion, because of the second thing that happened along with that Leclerc penalty. Due to what I'd consider a poorly worded rule that needs to be very much clarified, this race, which was only run to 53% of the total race distance, awarded full points rather than what Max and the rest of all of us believed would be partial points. This is because that big rule change that we got in response to the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix was, in retrospect, very misleading. The exact wording of that rule is as follows. If a race is suspended in accordance with Article 57 and cannot be resumed, points for each title will be awarded in accordance with the following criteria, and then it goes on to outline how 2 laps must be completed for any points to be awarded, and then how more points will be awarded depending on how many quarters of the race have been completed, with this race seemingly falling into the 50% to 74% partial points window, and barely at that, by the way, at just 53% of the race distance having been completed. Now, the key phrase here that none of us really were looking at until this race is, if a race is suspended in accordance with Article 57 and cannot be resumed. Well, this race was resumed and finished on track under green flag conditions, which is why this big rule that we all thought applied for all wet weather races and shortened races did not in fact apply. and why full points were awarded rather than partial points. And if you're wondering about the implications of this now confirmed reading of the rulebook, it means a race that is run to 74% of total race distance and then suspended due to rain and never resumed is worth less points than a race that's heavily delayed, but then gets a few laps in under green flag conditions before time runs out on the 3-hour clock. How does that make any sense? That's absurd. That is completely bonkers and not what the majority of people thought was the case. So yeah, the FIA definitely need to do something here and look at this rule, because that's just bizarre. But hey, Max is your champion. It was inevitable. I think, obviously, if this was like, the last race of the season or something and he was coming from behind, obviously there'd be a lot more stink about this, but we all knew Max was going to win. So the second storyline was, how will Yuki Tsunoda perform at his first ever home Grand Prix? And he did average. He did fine. Not particularly good. Not bad. He qualified P13, finished P13, which is actually tied for his best finish since the Spanish Grand Prix, as he's had a bit of a rough second half of the season. And also, these were obviously less than ideal conditions in which to drive your first home Grand Prix if you're trying to finish in the points. But Yuki has a spot on the grid for the 2023 season, so there's always next year. Good luck, Yuki. The final storyline was, what's up with this whole cost cap thing? And let me tell you, we got a big update/non-update from the FIA today regarding this. Aston Martin was found to be in procedural breach of the 2021 cost cap, and Red Bull was found to be in both procedural and also minor overspend breaches of the 2021 cost cap. And F1 Twitter is going crazy. By the way, a minor overspend breach is a breach of less than 5% of the cost cap, so up to around $7 million. Rumor has it so far that they overspent by $1 to $2 million, though it is just rumor and unconfirmed. I want to stress that. A procedural breach could be something as simple as filing paperwork incorrectly. We'll have to wait and see what exactly it was in these instances. There's no word from the FIA yet on what penalties for these breaches might look like, or by how much Red Bull overspent, or really anything else besides what I just said. So despite how much of F1 Twitter already wants to strip Max of his 2021 championship and ban Red Bull from F1 for life, we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out, okay? It's worth noting that Red Bull have come out and said, quote, "We note the findings by the FIA of minor overspend breaches of the financial regulations with surprise and disappointment. Our 2021 submission was below the cost cap limit, so we need to carefully review the FIA's findings, as our belief remains that the relevant costs are under the 2021 cost cap amount. Despite the conjecture and positioning of others, there is of course a process under the regulations with the FIA, which we will respectfully follow while we consider all the options available to us. I will keep you all updated on how this saga unfolds. It's probably going to be dramatic, and F1 Twitter is probably going to make it way more dramatic than it actually is or needs to be." Next up, here are some additional Japanese Grand Prix storylines that arose throughout the race weekend and that won't be covered by way of the upcoming Bone Phone voicemails. First up, there's the whole Pierre Gasly tractor fiasco that I'm sure you all have heard about by now. The FIA flat out sucks for scapegoating Gasly here, as it's very apparent that a tractor and marshals should never be on track at that time in those conditions, regardless of how fast Gasly was going, especially with Suzuka being the circuit at which an extremely similar incident in 2014 ended up taking the life of F1 driver Jules Bianchi. Gasly barely had any time to even realize the race had been red flagged before he reached the tractor on the racing line, while, yes, going at a high rate of speed, but at a rate of speed that had been allowed under the yellow flag conditions he had just been in, so you can't really blame him for that. The FIA needs to ensure that nothing even remotely resembling this ever happens again by reviewing their car recovery protocol, especially when it comes to car recoveries in wet conditions. Next, a massive heaping of congratulations are in order for two different drivers. Congrats to one Nicholas the GOAT Latifi for finishing P9 at Suzuka and scoring his first points of the season. Latifi! Not only that, but Goatifi is now solidly back in P20 in this 20-driver championship as he's leapfrogged Nick de Vries via tiebreaker. Huzzah! Also, secondly, congrats to Zhou Guanyu for getting the fastest lap award at Suzuka, the first of his career. He didn't get a point for it because he didn't finish in the points, but it's still a great accomplishment considering he did it on intermediates, which every other driver was on. I should note that this is the second race in a row where the driver with the fastest lap finished outside the points, which is something we may not see again for quite some time because it's pretty rare. And finally, a big screw you to the broadcast producers for not showing us that incredibly wild photo finish between Alonso and Vettel. We were robbed of an almost certainly legendary Crofty call there, and I'm still not over it. Sad. All right, listen up, Bone Brigade, and listen good. This episode doesn't have any sponsors because it's brought to you entirely by the Formula Bone Shop, where you can get the best Formula One inspired merch anywhere on the internet. I just did a massive Formula Bone merch drop filled with custom designs straight from the brain of J-Bone that I think you're going to love and that ship globally. I ship all around the globe. First, there's probably my favorite design of the entire bunch and the bestseller, Donka Seb, available on a shirt like the one I'm holding up and a coffee mug. It's the unofficial design of saying bye to Inspector Seb because we're all going to miss this legendary 4-time world champion and professional scooterer. Next up, there's the DRS chicken design, which is available on a shirt and a coffee mug. Remember those Max vs. Charles Leclerc DRS chicken games they were playing? I know, it does feel like forever ago. Well, for some reason, I decided to imagine what DRS chicken would look like if it were a fried chicken restaurant, and the rest is history. And lastly, self-loathing fans of a certain American Formula One team, this design is for you. It's what I'm wearing on my head, on this hat. It's what I'm wearing on my shirt all episode. Meet Pain F1 Team, the most disappointing yet hope-inspiring F1 team ever created. Available on a shirt like this, available on a hat like the one I'm wearing, available on a coffee mug like the one right here. I love this design. If you're an American F1 fan, you know pain. You know pain. So wear it. And of course, I also have a few pieces of Formula Bone themed merch available in the shop as well. I currently offer global shipping to over 50 countries and territories. When you buy Formula Bone merch, you are directly supporting Formula Bone financially and making it so I can keep making Formula One content. So I really, really appreciate the support, folks. J-Bone! It's now time to check in with you all regarding how my 3 bona fide race predictions fared at the Japanese Grand Prix. My first race prediction was that Max Verstappen would win the Japanese Grand Prix and be crowned World Drivers' Champion. And ding ding, J-Bone got that one right. J-Bone! Man, it feels really good to do a ding ding and a J-Bone after being so wrong so much lately. This prediction was certainly never in doubt, not even after the race when not a single person, including Max, actually thought he was going to be crowned World Drivers' Champion. J-Bone knew all along. Never in doubt. My second race prediction was that Lewis Hamilton would be back on the podium for the first time since the F1 break. And while I did get this one wrong, as he finished P5, I fortunately have the built-in excuse that he totally would have finished on the podium if we'd actually gotten a full race that wasn't shortened by rain. Totally. And nobody can deny that because it is impossible to prove wrong. Checkmate. My third and final race prediction was that Yuki Tsunoda would finish in the points at his home Grand Prix. And this one's on me. I was originally going to predict that Suzuka loving Seb would finish on the podium, which he did, kudos to almost me. But I decided to get fancy with it. I was like, you know what? This is the Formula Bowen F1 show. I'm going to say something crazy, something people aren't going to expect, because Yuki hasn't scored points in a really long time. And so I said Yuki and not Seb. I tried to be fancy and it bit me. Lesson learned. Going 1 for 3 on my bona fide race predictions is less than ideal. Okay? But the next race is my home race, the USGP. So you know that my predictions are all going to be 100% correct for that one. J-Bone! Make sure you toss me a subscription so you can hear those predictions when they drop, because like I said, they're going to be perfect. Next up, it is time to respond to some Japanese Grand Prix themed voicemails left by Formula Bowen F1 show listeners on the Bowen phone. If you're new to the Formula Bowen F1 show, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. After every single race this season, I do one of these race recap episodes, and a large part of them is me responding to questions, comments, hot takes, and more left by Formula Bowen F1 show viewers and listeners on the Bowen phone, the number for which is 1-833-200-0966. And if you live somewhere where it is difficult to make phone calls, I've also created a channel in the Formula Bowen Discord server where you can submit voice memos directly from your phone rather than calling the hotline number. Check it out via the Discord invite link that is in the description of this episode. And also, even if you don't want to leave a Bowen phone voicemail, just join the Formula Bowen Discord anyways, because it's fun and we have a great F1 community growing there, over 800 people. So during or after each race, whenever you have an interesting thought, hot take, complaint, or anything else like that, make sure to hit up the Bowen phone or the Formula Bowen Discord for a chance at your voicemail being played on the show. Without further ado, here's the first call.
Hey, it's Luke from Minnesota. What is your opinion on the very quick FIA race steward's decision to give Charles Leclerc that penalty?
I can understand why some people are frustrated about this penalty, especially considering how the stewards took hours to consider Checo's race-deciding penalty in Singapore, including speaking with him, and how they didn't even speak with Leclerc before announcing a decision that not only took him down a podium place, but also ended his title challenge and relegated him to P3 in the World Drivers' Championship behind Checo. But I will say, in my opinion, this was a slam dunk penalty with precedent, too, that I don't think merited Charles speaking with the stewards or any real investigation. In their official decision, the stewards cite 2 previous incidents of precedent this season where drivers were penalized for going off track and retaining their position while defending. There was Joe's penalty in Saudi Arabia and Alonso's penalty in Miami. Though I do want to once again say that the timing of it all was definitely a bit odd, and I feel like they may have rushed this decision in before the podium celebration so that Max could have a more spectacular World Drivers' Champion-y celebration up there. But still, I think they would have made the same decision had they taken longer to consider the penalty, so it doesn't really matter. Next call.
Hey, J-Bone. Now that Verstappen has wrapped up the championship, do you think that Red Bull can keep the 1-2 they have right now, or do you think that Leclerc could overtake Checo in the standings by the end of the season? J-Bone!
I am very excited to watch the battle for P2 in the World Drivers' Championship unfold. Currently, Checo leads Leclerc by just 1 point in the World Drivers' Championship standings after leapfrogging Leclerc in Japan by way of that last lap penalty. It's truly anyone's game right now, as these evenly matched drivers are both driving well and coming off back-to-back podiums headed into the final 4 races of the season. Though personally, I would have to give the advantage to Checo, and this is because of my belief in the conspiracy theory that since Red Bull have already locked up Max's World Drivers' Championship, they'll use Max as a supporting driver in Mexico to help Checo get P1 at his home Grand Prix. Next call.
J-Bone! What's up? This is Joseph calling from California, and I'm sitting looking at the news right now of two moves with Pierre Gasly going to Alpine and Nick DeVries signing with AlphaTauri. Personally, I think it's a really strong move for Alpine to have two French drivers, but I'd love to hear your opinion. J-Bone!
I kind of wish that I was French, because the fact that the French team now has an all-French driver pairing is really cool from a country pride perspective. However, how unfortunate is it for Alpine that the year the French team goes all French happens to be the year the French Grand Prix is once again left off the calendar? Major oof there. Unfortunate timing. I'm very excited for Gasly to be at Alpine now. He clearly needed to get the heck out of the Red Bull racing world, and realistically, this is probably the best opportunity he could have gotten, all things considered. Hopefully he can use it to revitalize his career. I'm very excited to watch that pairing. Could get pretty competitive. These two have had a little bit of a rivalry in the past, Ocon and Gasly, so definitely a pairing to watch. I'm getting like Senna Prost vibes, you know, except they're probably not going to be finishing 1-2, but you never know. And as far as Nick DeVries replacing Gasly at AlphaTauri goes, I'm so happy that all Nick's waiting finally paid off. Nobody can say that he did not deserve a spot on the grid, especially after what he did at Monza. And I cannot wait to see how he does in what will hopefully be a competitive midfield car. And then there are still two more spots to fill. There is Mick's potentially vacant Haas seat and Nicholas Latifi's vacant Williams seat. Daniel Ricciardo has said he doesn't think he'll be back in F1 next season, though I wouldn't necessarily count him out just yet in case he works something out with Haas since he is so popular in the United States. I do not see Daniel at Williams, though. I think they're too backmarkery for him. I think Mick has a good shot at keeping his Haas seat, though who knows. And there are some rumblings now that Williams may announce American F2 driver Logan Sargent as their second driver, and if that happens, all of us American F1 fans will go absolutely bananas. Silly season, though, rolls on. Next call.
Hey, J-Bone. This is Gus from Texas. I was just wondering, what do you think the chances are that Aston Martin finishes 6th in the Constructors' Championship? J-Bone.
Aston Martin are currently P7 in the World Constructors' Championship with 45 points, behind Alfa Romeo in P6 with 52. And I fully expect Aston Martin to finish the season P6 ahead of Alfa Romeo. Aston Martin are the much, much hotter team right now, emphasis on both of those muches. Alfa Romeo have just 1 point total in the last 9 races, while Aston Martin have 29. Aston Martin also have something extra to prove with all this cost cap controversy kind of surrounding them, so I think they will handily take this P6. Last call.
Hey J-Bone, this is Vishnu from India. Great show, keep up the good work. I feel really bad that Alex Albon had to retire from the race due to car issue. Do you think he deserves a better car? Thanks, Godspeed. J-Bone!
It is hard for me to say that Albon deserves a better car right now because he had a better car 2 seasons ago and kind of squandered his opportunity, or Lewis Hamilton squandered his opportunity, depending on how you want to look at it. But I will say, I definitely think he is a better driver than his current awful car makes him often appear to be. And I do hope that he gets another opportunity in a good car in the future to show us what he's all about and how much he's improved. I think with Pierre now leaving the Red Bull driver tree, Albon is currently next in line for that Checo seat, aka his old seat. So hopefully down the line, we get to see Albon driving a top car once again. That's it for today's episode of the Formula Bone F1 show. If you want to support Formula Bone and are able to, I would really appreciate it if you bought a piece of Formula Bone merch, available now on bolenmedia.com/shop. I've placed a link to the Formula Bone shop in the description of this episode. And if you're looking for a free way to support Formula Bone, just toss the YouTube video of this episode a like and my YouTube channel a subscription and turn on all notifications so that the algorithm likes me more. For Formula One updates between now and my United States Grand Prix preview episode next week, you can join over 800 members of the Bone Brigade in the Formula Bone Discord server via the invite link in the description of this episode. You can also follow me on all social media at Formula Bone and at my real name, Jared Borislow. That's at JaredBorislow. Until next time, folks, J-Bone!